Welcome to another episode of the Five Senses webcast. I'm Robert Zinni, the host, and yes, I am back in studio after a long, I don't even know what the word is, absence, I don't know, social distancing, whatever you think. Today, I have Joe Howard, who is the superintendent of Prescott Unified School District, here to talk about, some of his passions, how the pandemic is shaping out for PUSD, and some other things that's happening. So, Joe, thank you for coming onto our show. How you been?
I've been great. Thanks for having me on the show. It's fun to be here. Great studio, great crew.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So, you are the superintendent of Prescott Unified School District. Throughout your career, you've had multiple jobs in the education world. What was your motivation to dedicate your life to education?
That's a big question. Well, I'll start it out with it was a little bit in my blood. My mom and dad were both teachers. My dad was actually the superintendent of the Prescott Unified School District. My family moved here in '85 because he got that job. We came from Nebraska. My parents probably told me lots of times that I should find a different profession for a multitude of reasons and money and things like that. That's what they told me. That's not what they modeled for me. What they modeled for me was that teaching and learning is, to them and to our family, the most honorable thing that you can do with a career, and paying that forward and helping kids to find that spark and that type of thing. So I started out as a teacher and a coach. I had a teacher and a coach when I was a student at Prescott High School, a guy named Greg Kirkham, who inspired me. I wanted to be like him. And so I got in as a teacher and a coach and did that for a while. And then someone pulled me out of the classroom and said, "What are you going to do for your master's?" And I said, "Well, I'm going for English because I want to write." And that administrator said, "No, you're not. You're going to get an admin degree." And I was like, "What?" I actually did. It was a little smoother than that. They kind of called me to leadership and said, "You have what it takes." I never looked for a leadership position. I didn't necessarily look for the superintendency. But more people came to me and said, "We think you should do this." And
Nice.
So I was inspired by that and took those steps, sometimes reluctantly. And I think you have to be respectful about those jobs because you have to be balanced, or it can go south pretty quick. But it's been a good run.
Nice. That's a huge compliment. Like somebody pulling you out of your class and you're like, "Hey, you have leadership skills. We believe in you."
Yeah.
That's excellent. So, now you are here. And even though we're going to talk about education, I really don't know too much about you, Joe, but I do know that we share similar interests of outdoor activities. So,
Absolutely.
When you're not, in charge of a school district, what do you like to do?
More than anything, I like to hop on a mountain bike. I think we live in the best place in the world for mountain biking in Prescott, Arizona. And I've been riding since as far as I know, since mountain bikes were invented in the late 80s. We started hopping on them right out of high school and riding trails that weren't trails then that are trails now. And I get so much out of that. The obvious things like the exercise, but I certainly find my connection with nature and some spirituality and lots. I find that flow out there. And I definitely find happiness when I'm on a mountain bike, especially going downhill.
Yeah.
The uphill part I don't like as much. I don't know anybody who really does, but that's the payoff. That's what keeps us in shape and helps us to be healthy. But then when I get to roll down, I kind of forget everything that's going on except for right then, right there.
So you're just cruising.
Yep.
Nice. What's one of your favorite trails here in Prescott?
Oh, there's just so many. And the one thing I'll say is that I can't believe after 30 years this summer, I spent a lot of it riding new trails. We're still building trails in Prescott. Right now, kind of where my wife and I have been riding the most is around the newer Williams Peak, Parker Canyon area. It's going up towards West Spruce. Okay. There's lots of new loops and things in there. It seems like you can just do endless combos in there until you're too tired to ride anymore.
Cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So what has been your approach with dealing with COVID-19 and the reopening of the school district?
Wow. Well, before I get into approach, I'll just comment generally on handling COVID and the pandemic. I've been through strikes, school closures, big time illnesses and buildings falling apart. No doubt COVID's the hardest thing I've ever done in my career because you just have so many people in so many different places with it in terms of politics and strong feelings, and it just knocked our whole country down pretty hard. And and people were just having a tough time even being nice sometimes. So luckily, though, we have built a culture in Prescott Unified School District really around a group of leaders and principals who had been through some hard times together. We closed those schools together and restructured the school district and reopened in a different way. And we've been together for 6 years now, and we went through something called Balanced Leadership together, a training through a group called McCrell, and we took lots and lots of trainings and read lots of books and did studies together about how to balance leadership, meaning how to put it in the hands of everyone in your organization. So how do we get teachers to see themselves as leaders? How do we get paraprofessionals and custodial and everyone to see themselves as leaders and know that when they have an idea or a problem or a concern, that they can speak up about it and let us know. And so we created systems that whenever we made decisions, rather than saying, here's what we think we should do because we're so smart or what experienced or whatever, we said, here's the issue, here are some options. And we had processes in place where the principals said to their staff and their teacher leaders, what do you think we should do? And so we've got this communication system going back and forth where ideas are coming back and forth. So COVID was very complex because you have people telling you how to do it or what to do or what you might do, but nobody really knew what to do. So I can tell you, I met with those leaders all summer for hours and hours and hours, and we took it one day at a time and one piece at a time. I was actually grateful for the state. You won't always hear me say that. I think they did a good job in terms of how to continue to keep schools open, keep the funding there so we don't lose our staff during all of this. And they also created the beginnings of a roadmap, which we followed closely. And then later on, when the state came out with metrics along with the health department, that tied right into the work we've been doing to create this roadmap. So it's really, and you're probably familiar with it to some extent, but it's really, you have to tailor it to your own situation, your own schools and your own districts, and even our own schools within our district to some extent. But that has helped us to not have like one answer, but have a multitude of answers to health and safety, different levels of COVID risk, like a moderate, minimal risk type situation, and then what type of learning coincides with that. So, when it was a maximum risk, we were in distance learning. We were not together with each other. And now that we're in a moderate risk, we've started this hybrid piece. So throughout all that, I have a school board. I have 5 elected officials who make the ultimate decisions in our district. And so they listen to their constituents throughout the community, and there's a lot of moving parts, but we've created great balance in terms of how we communicate when we make a decision, and I think this is a public school thing, so you understand it. We more than a lot of organizations, because we have so many different people, we have to listen to everybody, and I think we do that genuinely, even when people are intense on one side or another, and we try to answer everybody's questions, and we try to meet the needs of the greater majority of our folks with safety first. So that's a lot of information there, but that's kind of how COVID rolled out. I mean, it was crazy and fast, and drinking from a fire hose, and I have to say, 2 weeks ago, the day we came back to school with half the kids at a time, was my best day in 6 months.
Nice.
Without a doubt. I was surprised at how great it made me feel to see, even behind masks, like glowing, twinkling eyes, because teachers were happy, kids were happy, parents were happy. Mm-hmm. I was happy.
Right. Joe, that's great. And I like how you said it's a roadmap, because this disease isn't going to go anywhere.
Right.
And, what you just said is like what I don't think a lot of people understand about education. Like, you can have somebody talk and teach you, but it's really like when you get a group of people in there that go for the same mission, that energy transference really brings everybody to life. When you stare at a computer for 6 hours at a time, like, I'm sure it's hard to even have that motivation to go on. Yeah. Let's just go into that. So, like, what are the realities of distance learning and teaching during a global pandemic? How's the staff responding? How's the students responding? Like, how is it going?
It's going well. I think people have made the best out of everything that they can. I'm really proud of our teachers. They just hung in there, and we worked together. But as part of that roadmap, we laid some of our philosophy out early and talked about it a lot. And that was that we strongly believe that the best way to teach and learn is in person when it's safe to do so.
Yeah.
Right. And so we never, I mean, people were like, this distance learning is horrible. And we're like, yeah, we know. But we put together a distance learning program that's as good as any that you can find, I believe, just like you did. And, in the spring, it was harder because we had to do it on the fly.
Right.
In the fall, it was easier because our teachers put a ton of time into it. We actually created a position and hired a distance learning coordinator that's helping parents, teachers, the whole thing. But I think the most important thing that I want to say is then we said if in-person teaching is we believe our most important way to teach, then hybrid's better than distance. And so even though it's a ton of work and you're teaching the same lesson twice all day long one day and all day long the next, and there's all these moving parts to it, we believe it's a better option for our kids right now because we can actually see them. And I would say that I saw that roll out last week because it's the first time in my 20-some years of first days of school that there was some robust teaching going on in the classrooms. You could hear great teaching echoing at the high school, at the middle school, at all levels. And I'm like, oh yeah, these guys have been together as teachers and students for a month. So they've got stuff rolling. But now that they're in person, they're way more empowered and they can make it happen better.
What have been some of the unique opportunities that the district is offering students through this pandemic?
Well, I think like every district and school, we are offering anyone who wants to stay online. If they feel uncomfortable coming to school, we're doing that for sure. We're also offering a place, even when we were in distance learning, starting August 17th, we offered a place for kids to come and do that distance learning. Even if they weren't able to do that at their home, we offered that program for them. We opened up our self-contained special education programs. Again, because those are small numbers and we're able to social distance and do those types of things. We fed, I believe we fed 45,000 people this summer, lunch and breakfast meals. And kudos to the feds because they just extended free lunches, not just for our own district. It was going to turn back to that, but now for anyone under 18. And so we continue to feed students. Our communication with parents and students has been nonstop through social media and any way we can get to them, emails, that type of thing, because people are really curious about what to do. But I mentioned earlier we hired a distance learning coordinator, and that's a person who's putting on webinars for parents and students to help them with distance learning and with hybrid learning and things like that. We also hired a health and safety coordinator who every day is thinking about the best ways to make sure that everyone's wearing their mask, make sure we have the right sanitizers. When there's a problem or an illness, that person, Alexa Scholl, sweeps right in there, and she's right in there helping to process with the health department and make sure that we keep COVID out. So those are some of the things that we've been doing.
Nice. And I'm glad to hear that, even though the situation has changed for a lot of people, they're showing that resilience and providing the best learning opportunity for the students. But I want to commend the district for keep on feeding the families out there. That's a huge aspect of our community.
Super important. And of course, technology is a big issue. Not everybody can afford Wi-Fi or has Wi-Fi that works. So we have a foundation called the Prescott Unified School District Education Foundation. And they've helped us through this whole thing by helping to provide Chromebooks for students. But they also then approved and gave us $30,000 in hotspots to take to families and say, okay, here's your internet. Now you got internet. So that, and we live in a great community. So we've got people that help us to do these things that seem unsurmountable. They are surmountable in a place like Prescott.
Right. Awesome, Joe. So we're going to focus on a different topic. So you and I both work in education, and the one thing I do have to tell people, one of the joys of education is every day's random.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And you never know what the students or the families will throw at you, good, bad, ugly. It's great.
Especially when you're an assistant principal.
Oh, exactly. Then you have to deal with everything, right? Just throw it to the office.
I was an assistant principal, and I will tell you those are the years where sometimes I think I affected the very most change.
Really?
And some of the students that needed the very most help. Because, you get your frequent flyers and the kids that are just really struggling and having trouble getting along or following rules or that type of thing. And those are the kids, you build a relationship with them and maybe make some of the biggest change in any student's life you're able to in that position. That's just my experience. But
Oh, well, thank you for sharing your insight. Okay.
we need our assistant principals.
True. We need everybody in education. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I need to touch upon this because we were talking about our community and you serve every student, which you said earlier. So over the summer, a student at PHS went viral, if you will, through social
yeah.
media that a lot of people felt it was offensive. It was hate speech.
Right.
They used PHS in their rant and whatnot. How did the district approach that situation? And then how does the district promote and teach tolerance throughout the schools?
Great question. Super important topic. And I'll just throw my disclaimer out first, and then I can tell it in story version if that's okay. But my disclaimer, and I think most of the public knows this, but I can't share details about that student directly or what we did to discipline that student. But I can just I'll talk generally about the process. You'll get a pretty good idea about it. But it's like everything we do, you have to do it through relationship. I suppose you could take a hammer out and just start hammering down, but I don't know that affects the change that you're looking for in something like this. So, but I can tell you, I know exactly where I was standing. It was a Sunday morning because I think this rolled out on a Saturday night, and my phone started lighting up. I was working on a van conversion, with a buddy, and I'm like, I got to go. So that ended up being my whole Sunday working with high school principal Mark Goligoski. And, I'll just tell you personally, like, I was extremely offended, extremely angry that person used the words that were used and created a fear in a place that we work so hard to not create fear. And that we have a motto called every child, every day. And this goes directly against that. So what does the district do? We drop everything we're doing. From my standpoint as a superintendent, I got to work a whole bunch of different angles. I got to be talking to a school board of 5 elected officials who are the ultimate decision makers and say, I got an issue, I'm working on it, you're going to see it in the newspaper, and we're going to do what we can here to keep you posted. So I worked directly with the principal, did most of the work. Mark Goligoski did most of the work. And the way that we approach things is, does the family know? Have we talked to the family? So, are they supportive of this type of thing or what? And again, where I can't get into details, we knew that if we got in touch with the family that, we hoped that we would get their support in stopping the problem and working on the problem and calling it out as not okay. And we did get that. And so that was a hard situation for all sides. It was certainly hard for people who were attacked verbally in that. It was hard for that family, and it was hard for the person who made the really bad decision. And so, we worked through a series of interviews and processes just like you do a lot as an assistant principal, and investigating and really finding out what happened and what intent was and things like that, and then trying to match. I try to stay away from the term punishment. We talk more about behavior modification because we're trying to help kids to learn how to operate the right way. But the reality is there are consequences when that type of thing happens. I don't think any of the consequences that we could offer would do as much as natural consequences, and I believe both occurred. Okay. So, and my stance is pretty tough when people break rules like that and affect a whole bunch of other people, and I get pretty upset when our educational institution is disrupted at that level and creates fear in people. We work so hard to make it a place for everyone. So what I will tell you is the best thing we had going for us in that situation is a guy named Mark Goligoski. I hired him as the principal at Prescott High School because of his heart of tolerance and love and relationship for every type of kids. I've known him most of my life. I graduated from high school with him. Nice. But I watched him as an administrator go to bat for kids and to go to bat for people again and again and again who were being singled out as different or not being accepted. And so that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is being able to find people to do the right thing there. And I'll even back up when we put Mark in as principal at Mile High Middle School. There was a suicide that year of an 8th grader, and it was one of the hardest things that either of us have ever dealt with. Those are the worst things in this job ever, for sure,
Yes,
bar
it
none.
is. Yep.
Worse than COVID. And the way that, we struggled with that together as friends and colleagues, and, we had our own tears, but what we leaned on each other saying is, like, you have to fix this with love. That's the only way to do this. You have to fix it with love. And I know that's very broad and general, but once we said that to each other and moved forward, we were able to make great decisions for kids and help them to work through, for instance, that suicide, or for instance, this type of situation. And so one of the neat things that came out about that is a lot of organizations in the community came to us and said, how can we help? GYCC, Greater Yavapai Coalition, came to us and said, how can we help? We set up a meeting with community leaders that we knew would be helpful in this situation, like them, Courtney Osterfeld from the Launchpad, Mark Goligoski from the high school, some of our counselors. And we really just talked through how can we help this particular community to work through this hateful piece to where they feel comfortable.
I just want to touch upon the Launchpad for a second.
Yeah.
Because we have students at North Point that go to Launchpad, and we
Yep.
get really good support from that organization too. What have they done specifically to help their students who feel ostracized or bullied in the district?
I'll just say Launchpad has been one of my favorite partners to work with ever. Just their mission and what they're set out to do is to be supportive of kids and create a place where they can come and be trusted, and a place where they know they can trust the people they're around. And so I love that they've created that atmosphere. My kids have spent time there. I think they did a song for one of the CDs a few years ago, and then my nephew goes there, and so it's just a neat place. In fact, Courtney Osterfeld has worked with my whole leadership team to do training for our staff. This has been happening for a couple of years in terms of tolerance and in terms of students making different choices and how to support them in those choices. So they've just always been a right-hand partner. I'll tell you, I mentioned earlier this childcare piece that we're doing, where even when school's closed, we're offering a place. And I called the Launchpad and Courtney up and said, we need some help with this. And she's all over it. She's just like, whatever you need. And so we put some things together and shared some resources, and we continue to partner. And so I just think, I'll tell you what, and this kind of goes back to one of your earlier questions, like, what do we do to create places that are safe for kids? I mean, what I've always led with from a full school district standpoint is that we create as many opportunities for kids, whether it's athletics or music or social clubs or emotional clubs or any type of niche that we can create for them to try things and see what they like and meet new people. And so Launchpad they've done that as well. I mean, that's a place that people can go to and love what they're doing, and it changes their lives. They could, they create leaders in there. And so that's really our philosophy in the district, is the more places that kids can go.
Right.
Yep.
Give them opportunities, experiences that will shape their life so they can make, like you said, appropriate decisions when they have to get the life that they want.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's why we created North Point.
Right, yeah.
I tell you, I was on the committee that created North Point.
Please tell me that story real
Oh,
quick.
it was great. I was the principal at Mile High Middle School, and I had adopted expeditionary learning, which I know you're very familiar with.
I love expeditionary
learning. And so at the same time, we wanted to create a high school for that to feed into, and so we wanted to create an alternative for our students that would be different than Prescott High School, and so we created North Point. The sad part of that story is our community didn't accept that, and there was a big faction of our community that really rose up against that, and the school board ended up having to say, well, we're going to part ways, and we did that peacefully, and we've been friends ever since, and colleagues ever since. But North Point will always have a place in my heart in terms of offering that place. You guys do it. You guys still do it in a great way.
Well, thank you, Joe, and thank you for helping start the school.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to do a shameless plug that, though I work at a charter school and you're the superintendent of a district, our end mission is to serve every kid and provide a good experience. good education and show the love and the support that every kid deserves to be successful. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation.
You bet.
Okay, so we're talking about education, and it seems like it's all doom and gloom. My next set of questions are about education funding.
Ooh, that is doom and gloom.
Like, you know,
Sorry. I do have a soapbox for that.
Okay, so so we all know that all our public schools get underfunded every year with people, the way that people vote, and there's always ballot initiatives or different initiatives that people can vote on and raise more money or even sales taxes. So I want to know, like, what have been the struggles with public education, and is there anything that's happening in the near future, because it is the election season, that people should know to help fund our public schools, especially during a global pandemic?
Well, I'm going to be blunt, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Funding education is written in law to be the job of the state, and they've done a lousy job for my entire career. And my children, who are 20 now and just graduated, and some of your crew here, and they went through a system that did not have enough funding to support it, to the point that we continue to be number 45, 47, 48, I think currently 46 in the nation. We are always in the bottom 4 of the nation for about 30 years. And so that didn't happen by accident. That was done by de-taxing and creating tax breaks that took away from education. And so I will say that the politicians, the legislature and the governor they say that it's a priority, but they have never, ever made it a priority. And so now you get what you have now on the ballot, like Prop 208, Invest in Ed, that are grassroots thing from the community because the state hasn't come up with a solution. And a lot of people will say, oh, what about Red for Ed and 20 by 2020? Well, respectfully, they didn't have a choice. The teachers quit teaching and said, if you don't pay for this thing that we're doing that's so important. And so they paid just enough to stay 48th in the nation. If we hadn't done 20 by 2020, and I'm grateful for that money, I don't know what would have happened to education. I mean, we were at the edge. We've remained at the edge. That said, you know, I'll get people who want to bring a business into Prescott and go, well, you guys have lousy education because you're 48th in the nation. You guys don't fund education like the rest of the country. And so I say, but no, please come walk through our schools, because you'll see that we have great schools, because we have great teachers. And even though they're not getting paid enough, they're doing a wonderful job. And we figured out how to make this work in the most starving of times with funding. Part of that is in Arizona and many states, you can go to your local communities and ask for more funding through bonds and overrides. And so although we lost those over many years, in 2015, we passed a bond and an override. And that supported us a lot more than we would have been by the state. So currently, PUSD's average teacher pay is about $6,000 below the state average. And so we're asking for our governing board called an 8% override, because 2015 is sunsetting. So if we do nothing, then we cut $1 million out of our budget from here on out per year. If we do call that election and the voters approve it, and 8% will get us the 4.66% that we had before for status quo. And then it'll give us another 3 to help pay our teachers, just enough to be $3,000 below the state average. So we're asking voters to do that on this election. There's also Prop 208. That would actually bring $3 million a year into a district like Prescott, most of that to teacher pay. That would probably get us off the bottom 10 of the nation. But not because any of our politicians or lawmakers decided to put any effort into education. So I don't mince my words about it. Our politicians have not made education a priority, besides in their words, and they haven't done anything to fix that. And that's been hard to watch for 30 years.
So we're almost about out of time, Joe, and we've talked a little bit about a lot of different topics. And before I ask you my last question, how would schools look if the funding was very appropriate?
Yeah, well, like I said, I think we've made some really good lemonade. And, I have all kinds of metaphors about how we live in a desert, and we also live in a desert of education. So we've learned how to actually thrive with that little amount of money. What would it look like in PUSD if we were appropriately funded? We wouldn't have teacher turnover. We're at one of the biggest teacher turnover crises, or the teacher shortage crises, in the history of the country, and Arizona leads it. So you'd get quality teachers, and they would stay. And that kind of consistency watch what happens to kids when that happens. It's unbelievable. We'd have buildings that weren't crumbling. We'd have programs that were vibrant, and we'd have buses that moved kids where they needed to be without breaking down, things like that. Again, we're finding ways to make that happen in a positive way. But we just don't have any wiggle room. And when something like COVID comes along, we don't, there's no breathing room. So that just wipes us out. And it's really hard to keep things moving when you're operating at that level. I guess the best way I can explain it is it's almost like a food deficiency. I mean, if you fed us more, we'd be stronger. We could run faster. We could do everything better. And so, the opposition will say, well, money doesn't fix everything. And I agree with that. But there's clear data that if you're below the average per pupil funding in the nation, then you are starving your students of their education. And it's actually showing in student achievement that students are achieving at a lesser rate because they don't have that base amount of money that's needed to educate a kid.
Wow. So much backstory and all the drama just to get the kids into the building to do education. Wow.
Yep.
So I'm going to leave you with my last question, Joe. It is one of my favorite questions I ask every guest.
Cool.
And, it's the end of the year. It's the school year 2021, June. Everybody's breaking for summer vacation. First off, I want to know, how does that feel? If you can answer that question.
Yeah.
And the last one is, what's your intent? What was your intention for the whole school year? Looking back on the pandemic school year.
Yeah, I was going to say I have to answer that totally differently due to COVID. And so I think I got a taste of it, like I was saying earlier in the show, when hybrid started and I got to see kids come back. And so I think we're all going to see some normalcy at some point. It's going to be a lot of work this year. But so if I'm looking back on that last day of school, I'm going to look back at how proud I am of our leaders, our teachers, and our students for doing the very best they could through this whole thing. Like I said, when I looked back, when we first got into hybrid, I looked back proudly after some of the hardest months of my career and a lot of people's lives, saying, we stayed in there and we worked hard as we could and tried to figure out the best way to do things. And I'm proud of how it rolled out. So I think it'll be that way. I'll look back and go, wow, we got through that. And there's some, that's one of the best parts of being a leader is when you got through something really tough with people, while you're getting through it, you don't really understand what you're doing. But when you get a chance to look back upon a year like that, and that's one of the best parts of education, we get to see that closure at the end of every year and look back and go, wow, look what we did. But I think more than any of the 25 years of my career, I'm going to look at that and go, wow, we let them through a tough storm. We let them through a really tough storm, and we survived it, and we're better for it.
Just a shout out to every teacher out there. You're doing a great job. We appreciate you as school leaders and also just being a part of the community to make a difference in everybody's life. So thank you for doing your job and keep doing it. And like Joe has just said, show that resilience because you're the role model for that kid. With that said, I'm Robert Cindie, and thank you for tuning in to the 5 Senses webcast. For more information, log on to 5enses.mag.com and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.